This is crazy that in any other industry you have digital tools. We have Trello, we have Slack, we have all these things that are just like ingrained into our lives at this point. And in Hash, there's nothing like that. People hated the software and they would rebel against it. They'd just use paper notes. So that was the first thing is how do we eliminate paper notes? It was a really simple thing of just, they're soaking them, they're messy, you can't read each other's handwriting. How do we eliminate paper notes?
And now, introducing the champion. All right, it's time.
All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another High Rise podcast. Derek, Aaron, and today we're here with our buddy Chase Sater. Chase is a longtime content creator. I don't want to call him content creator because he's like a fire macro photographer. You guys have probably seen his photos a few years ago all over the social medias. Probably seen his punch billboards with some of his macro photography, his rosin shots. Chase has always been into tech, a lot of stuff that Aaron gets into, stuff that's way over my head, but he is involved in something new called Hashy, and I don't even know what it is. I've seen it. You guys are doing a great job creating content, and from what I've seen, it's basically a bunch of tech that helps hash makers with their process. So we haven't seen Chase in a while. We used to session with him all the time. This is the first time we got to sit down with him and kind of killing two birds with one stone, hearing what he's up to. So we really want to know what's going on with Hashy. I see the IG stuff. I see you guys with your automated hash sifters for weighing. I don't even know the term, so I'm not an extractor myself. But we want to know, and we'll let the people know as you explain to us.
Yeah, no, I'm super hyped to be here. It's cool to see the new place and setup. And yeah, I came from the macro and content side of things. As you said, the High Rise team was always a huge inspiration to me. And I think definitely you guys helped me get my foot in the industry in the first place. And now I'm working on, as you said, a data tracking platform for hash makers, and then also a bunch of sort of digital smart tools. We have a freeze dryer monitor. We're working on now automated scales, as you've said, and presses, wash vessels, all that sort of stuff. So it's been super interesting. I think the last time we met, it was when we were just prototyping it. We had some designs, I think, and we were showing you. I remember it was still at the mansion. Yeah, it was we just had prototypes. Hey, we're thinking about making a data tracking app. What do you guys think? And we made that, and then we went on to the freeze dryer side of things. So it's been now our focus for 2 years, Hashy, and then more specifically the freeze dryer side for the last year about.
Dude, that's awesome, because from knowing you the last few years, just as a homie and seeing what you're posting, what you're into, the conversations we have, it's so much tech, it's so much back end data, it's so much I don't know if it's programming or whatever, but finding ways to simplify these processes. Tell us about just the process or your thought process behind it of the need, something, creating something that's needed. People have been using the same process for washing hash or cultivation or whatever for years. Tell us about why you wanted to create this.
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys have seen the same thing going around and shooting in labs, and that's how I noticed it at first too, was just paper notes everywhere. You'd go into these multi-million-dollar build outs and they'd have really nice equipment, automated wash vessels, ospreys, nice presses, all of this, but there was still just soggy paper notes everywhere. And there'd be some guy in the corner translating stuff from those into some spreadsheet, sometimes metrics. So that was the first thing. I started seeing that and just kind of put the idea in the back of my head. This is way back in the macro days too, of this is crazy that in any other industry you have digital tools. We have Trello, we have Slack, we have all these things that are just ingrained into our lives at this point. And in Hash, there's nothing like that. People hated the software and they would rebel against it. They'd just use paper notes. So that was the first thing is how do we eliminate paper notes? It was a really simple thing of just, they're soaking them, they're messy, you can't read each other's handwriting. How do we eliminate paper notes? And then we started to realize this theme of data tracking is just super, I think it's hard to access with the tools that we have in Hash now because it's so based around paper notes. So if you're a data-driven hash maker, for years it looked like, okay, I have a notebook with all of my things, and then I'll go back there and look and see what this washed at 2 years ago or something. And I think our approach is really just how do we make data actionable and actually useful for people. So we, kind of accomplished the paper notes goal of having an alternative for that. And now it's more like, what are things that are actually useful? Because we know tracking yields and looking at how different strains perform are useful, and it's pretty basic stuff. But taking it to the next level of, okay, well, how should you actually change your process when you are confronted with this data? And that's still an ongoing challenge. There's this concept of, oh, there's so many variables in hash. How can you track it, and how can you make something that's consistent? And that's kind of our whole argument is, well, by starting to track things, right? Like, we're not going to capture it all in one, and we can't. Our goal is not to automate hash or make something that's entirely repeatable, but instead, when you know this strain is a little bit sandy, let's say, or the resin is a little too oily, you can change your process down the chain to accommodate that. So yeah, that's the main need, I would say, for sure. And we're constantly just spending time in labs trying to now figure out what are the specific pain points of data entry. How can we make it super fast, whether it's pulling data right off the presses or right off the freeze dryers? How do we eliminate the actual need to even enter it not in paper notes? So that's our big challenge now. And yeah, the key, I would say, is just we're spending as much time in labs and talking with hash makers and customers as possible. It's 80% of my schedule probably.
Yeah, it's just getting the information from them so that you can build the platform for them to get the information to refine their product.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's crazy. And how has that been working with some of these extractors? Like, I'm sure, people have been running it the same way, grassroots, for so long that you're going to have pushback from some, you're going to have interest from some. How has that been, like, getting any pushback from some OGs?
Yeah, so at first, when we launched just like the manual data tracking app, we posted it on Reddit. We asked a bunch of people that we knew to use it, and there was a ton of pushback. It was like, oh, what are these guys going to do? They're going to steal our data. They're going to sell our data to people. And our response always was, of course, we're not going to do that. But also, like, you do realize that nobody wants to buy it. There's not people who are like, I want to know what XYZ's catalog was last year and how it washed, because it's not actionable, right? So that was the main pushback, is just like, what are they going to do with our data? And I think over time we just kind of stuck around, explained it, built relationships, and moved past that. Then the pushback was sort of just like, not pushback, but more the question of like, okay, cool, data, but what can we do with it? I see data coming in from my freeze dryer, but what am I actually going to do with this? And that is, something we're trying through content, through going to people and just explaining, to constantly improve and explain. So yeah, it's a really interesting challenge of like, you have people who get locked into a certain SOP or recipe. OGs, people who are new that just get handed something, and there's usually, like, we don't ever make recommendations of like, hey, you should be doing this. That's not our philosophy. It's more like, hey, we're just gonna help you figure out what you're doing. So I don't know that there's so much pushback to change specific things, but there is that initial like shock factor, I guess, of like, okay, we have all this data, but what now? What, and it's, fortunately for us, like, we were also kind of worried at first, are we going to be able to discover this stuff in a meaningful way quickly without having their actual batch context all the time? And it's proven to actually be a lot simpler, because there's super nuanced stuff, right? Like, what temperature are you pressing at and for how long, and all of these things that are going to be so cultivar dependent, so batch dependent. And I think that's where it's tricky to make definitive trends or recommendations. But take something like a freeze dryer, for example. If we look at that data and we just see like, whoa, your cold room is now hot as shit, and your batches are taking longer, that's a very easy observation, I think, for anybody to digest of, oh, okay, I need to change something then. So for us, yeah, the the main goal of how do we make this stuff actionable is also, I think, what people question the most, but it's pretty easy. You know, there's some stuff that definitely is harder, and we can't, again, like, capture all of the entire picture of what's happening in a lab at once. So we just try to bite off small chunks. Like, okay, we'll start with the freeze dryers. You know, let's figure out how to optimize for it. People have questions like, how should we be treating different strains? And while we can't make a recommendation of, okay, do GMO this way, it would be absurd for us to do that. It's easy to look at data even just for a couple months and see, okay, well, here's how your different farms behave. Here's how the different resin behaves. I think that's really pretty much it in terms of pushback. The last one just being cost. And for that, we had a subscription model, and I still believe in that, and I'm happy to talk about why we think subscription models are actually better for people. But the community wanted it to be a buy it for life, so we switched to that, and now it seems like there's a lot also less friction about pricing. So those were the three kind of main pillars that we addressed initially.
So it's like a piece of hardware and then like a back-end portal or system or something
Exactly.
like that kind of attaches to it.
Exactly.
And so like, what was that like when you're like, okay, I want to build an app? Like, where do you fucking start? Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
So-
what does that look like?
I got really lucky in that I had a best friend since like sixth grade, basically, where super smart guy, and we always knew that we wanted to do something together. His name's Keaton, and he went off to school in New York at Cornell, and I went off and did the delivery service thing for a while and was just doing different startups. And we both knew that we wanted to do something together. We just didn't really know what or when. And the timing just kind of all lined up perfectly. He was one of the first people that I ever told about this issue of like, yo, people are just using paper notes and it's fucking ridiculous and $1 million labs. So we always had it in the back of our mind, like, this is something important to deal with. And then, yeah, we just kind of randomly decided after he graduated, like, all right, let's make a run at this. We're going to try to start a startup. And at first, I think actually we told you guys about this too, way before the data tracking app even. We wanted to do it as a crypto project where we were going to have like...
It was like clothing, right? Or something?
It was something related to clothing, but the main component of it was like basically a platform where grows, like 710 Labs, for example, would have voting parameters for their consumers. So a consumer could basically say, hey, we want this batch to go to Living Soil and Water Hash, or we want this to be made into this. Basically like a community growing experience. Yeah. So we started with that, and that's where like we actually started coding too, was just working on all of that. And we realized super early, like, this is going to be a very bad thing, the whole crypto experience for us. And we were also doing a lot of consulting on the side, so we were like, we'll kind of just focus on the consulting and see what happens. So that was what initially brought us together. And in the background, we started cooking up the Hash app, and he was just, like coding. He's the one who writes pretty much all of the code for everything. So he was just starting and working on the prototype. I would mostly do designs and, like work with hash makers. And yeah, we pretty much immediately sunsetted the crypto project and the consulting area of our business and just went all in on Hashy as soon as we started to get traction. But yeah, he's a wizard with like all full stack dev stuff. So I just got really, really lucky. And the truth is, if we didn't have the ability to do that stuff in-house and like the experience of doing the whole agency thing on the side before, I think it would have been like an absolute disaster. It wouldn't have been possible. Yeah, it wouldn't have been possible. Coming from the agency world, like we would have charged ourselves an amount that would have made it impossible, So it was just like, okay, yeah, we got to hack it together and do it as an actual startup.
Yeah. How long did that take to get like the initial prototype with that?
The initial prototype was maybe 2 months, 3 months. It was actually quite fast. At first it was actually just pressing. So we knew, like, obviously we want to cover all aspects of the lab, but for the MVP, we were like, pressing is the main focus. So we'll just do pressing. And we had coming soon on the wash, the freeze dry, all of that. So that that took 2 months, I would say, 3 months, and pretty much immediately we got traction. Like we posted it, it went pretty viral on Reddit. We got a bunch of signups. So then we were like, all right, we'll roll with this and keep going and build out all of the wash stuff. And that's when we started to take it a little bit more seriously. And I think to get to an actual complete version from wash to press was much longer, like 8 months probably. But in that time also we started working with Low Temp Industries. I don't know if you know those guys. They make like the most famous rosin press in every single lab basically. So we started working with them on that, which was a connected rosin press. And so we were doing that and the Hash app at the same time with the idea of like, we need to connect this stuff all together. And as soon as you add in that, the scope just increases by many months. So now it's a lot slower because we have to also make sure that we're supporting, like, you know, for example, on the freeze dryer, we're supporting freeze dryers that are 7 years old in some cases. So it's not like we can just ship out a totally new product every 2 months, but we still try to move fast, you know, and just get stuff out really low fidelity so that people can test it immediately.
Yeah. And then like developing these other products, like, so now that you like start working with all these labs, are you kind of just seeing like gaps and like things you're like, oh, I could make this, that'll make that easier, and then like what does that look like?
The really hard part for me, and I think anybody in general, but specifically me, is like, I want to make a lot of cool shit, right? Like the whole reason we got into this was because we came from the tech side of things, and I think always applied that lens to different cannabis stuff. So it's like, it's really tricky to figure out what are actual problems, because we want to connect everything and pull in all of the data and do cool visualizations and dashboards and all of that stuff. But realistically, the main problems at the end of the day are super boring. Like, I have to write this down 3 times before it gets into metric.
Like the most simple.
It's super simple. So that changed like our approach to it a lot. Our approach at first was like, hey, we're just going to connect every single piece of the lab and just start methodically, like going to all the companies and doing it. And I would say like, yeah, the as soon as we started getting customers for the freeze drying monitoring device, we really changed that approach and only started building things that people explicitly requested. For example, like, I keep going back to the writing down stuff. Like, if you are pressing a lot of rosin right now, and say you're working as a toll lab with 7 different, farms at any given week, which is pretty common, like, you're spending probably like 40 minutes a day just writing stuff down, transferring it into labels, then transferring it into metrics. So we ground everything we do in like, okay, but is it solving the issue of that guy who has to now spend this amount of time writing stuff down? And if it doesn't, then we shouldn't. That's, I would say, more specific to like, the data tracking side of things. But on now like our connected tech, that's a little bit harder, right? Because we're in this territory of we are making stuff that people don't have yet. So it's not like there's an explicit need for pulling up your condenser temperature on your freeze dryer, So those problems are harder because we're kind of, in a way, making them, but trying to then apply them to like, okay, he says his batches are taking way too long, Okay, well, this directly solves that. But yeah, it's just like, it's fascinating to go to so many different labs and see that they all have really, really similar issues at the end of the day. And they're dependent on scale, and I think also predominantly whether or not you're single source or toll processing. And other than that, like, very, very, very similar. So yeah, just going to labs, and I like just stand behind the guys and watch them as they're doing it, and just see like, okay, what's taking the longest? What is annoying to them? What's painful, And it's different than when we started, and we're sort of just like, oh yeah, it needs to be a whole connected cold room. You need to be able to check in on that stuff from your phone. That is still the end goal, right? But it's definitely more like we're stringing together very specific needs that alleviate time writing in metric, time going back and trying to find data, sending reports to growers, which now you have to assemble by hand, and so we try to root everything in a super specific time-saving element, I would say.
Yeah, it's like more tangible. It's like, yeah. And I noticed like I was looking through the IG and like I thought the marketing was like really well done. And it's like a lot of like lose your fucking dryer, lose $50,000. Like you're like
Yeah.
showing actual breakdowns and like case study type stuff. I thought that was like pretty dope. You said you guys went viral on Reddit. So like what was the marketing like rollout like initially like
Yeah, so
that strategy?
we've always taken the approach, and we still do now 2 years later, of like and we were talking about this before it started, like we are super scrappy. Like we have nice camera gear. You guys know that we know how to make good shit, but most of our stuff is really quite bad and just filmed on iPhones, because we realized that on one level, that content just performs better very consistently. On the other level, the time to ship, I think, is the most, like, that's the most important metric. And so for us, it was all about how do we get the time to ship content as low as possible. And it's literally take out a video. Oh, hey, this is an app we made. Guys, check it out. Okay, post it on Reddit, ask a question, done. That's the level of thought that was going into it. And those were the first posts that did really well for us, was just like, hey, would this data tracking app be useful? How would you change it? What do you want to see here? What are the things that you want to track? And I think we got like easily 100,000 views, just literally not even thinking about it and posting stuff like that. Then we are now a little bit more intentional with it, and like I think we almost there's no recipe, right? Because it's so different every time, but we can pretty consistently, I think, engineer stuff to get on Instagram like over 100K views, which for us is crazy with sub 10K followers. But it's really the same process of like we just take the phone, film a sort of DIY, hey guys, what do you think about this? The main change that we made is like really fast now. All of our videos we try to get under 10 seconds. Like that's the sweet spot. And it works on pretty much every platform.
Throw
Like,
little captions on there, like
Voiceover.
voiceovers.
and it's
State the problem, like get the hook, state the problem, give the solution.
Exactly.
10 seconds.
It's funny because I feel like we're all on the same page of like making really artsy storytelling shit, and like that's where my interest and passion is with a lot of our content. Puffco's content is amazing, right? Like, so it's fascinating to really try to do the polar opposite of that with what we do, but it's, I think, just like, in terms of shipping time, again, it's like you can't make a full-on video edited in DaVinci with amazing color grading and all of this stuff in the time that you can just shit something out on an iPhone.
Yeah. Nobody gives a fuck. They're just gonna scroll right past it either way.
And who's your consumer? Who's your consumer? Your consumer is somebody who owns and operates a lab. Your consumer is not like a regular customer
Exactly.
who's trying to buy like merch or trying to buy a car or trying to
Exactly.
buy something. Like, it's a business owner who wants the information. You show me the problem I have and then show me how you're going to fix it in 10 seconds.
I think like we want to do the other stuff though, to be clear, and I was saying this too before, like we want to make artsier stuff. Now we're going to take the effort of doing like actual interviews when we go to some of these labs and making it look good, and we'll test it. But my theory is that like it's probably not going to outperform the iPhone stuff, but it is like, I think a balance is important, like as you said, the lab owner probably doesn't care if we're shooting some super cinematic tech reveal of our product, but at the same time, for us, it's the same as, I guess, the overall mission of data tracking. Like, we want to push this forward, and we think there's cool content to be made of showing what goes on at these labs and interviewing hash makers and stuff. So I think there's value in both, but it is really just like when you think about the time per view, our videos that all have the most views have by far the lowest time spent on getting them to that point. They were just things that we shot in quite literally 5 minutes most of the time.
Dude, that's literally like the same with our stuff. Like Derek's literally made so many videos in literally probably less than 30 seconds that just millions of views. It's like just the simplest thing. Like
Because
it's
people
crazy
can feel it.
Yeah, it's just like relatable and organic and whatever, and like mixing the content. Like that's like literally what we tell all of our clients. It's like, let's do these iPhone like more viral, organic, relatable kind of videos, but like let's sprinkle in some like dope fucking high quality photo in the middle, or like photo of your lab, or like interview, or like I think it's important to have that like sprinkled like in between the other types of content. So like we're definitely like on the same page with that strategy for sure. Like
And I think the way that you're doing it too, where you should definitely start off like when you're doing it on Reddit, you're almost it's like crowdsourcing information. You know, like you're asking the Reddit niche
Exactly.
community
Yeah.
what, and then you do, and then you apply that to your business, and then you slowly then you do the informational stuff with IG. Once you build a bigger community, then maybe you know like what's the dream like a lab coming to you from the jump and being like, we're going to build this from scratch. How can we implement your tech? And then you shoot that high quality
Yeah,
so you can show
exactly.
the potential of all of this. And you shoot that 6K, whatever, on
Exactly.
the Black Magic. But yeah, I think also starting slow, like people coming out and brands coming out wanting to just start with the high quality, like that's not relatable. And if you're starting with the high quality, people are going to look at you and have this expectation as a brand where start as a person. And when you start as a
show
person,
journey, like
show that, yeah, exactly. And then start
put in
sprinkling it
great
in. And then
Yeah.
people are happy for you when you get the first video with a DSLR. You know,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my
Put
God,
in
they stepped up from the phone to the DSLR. And they're like, wow. And they're happy for you instead of just coming out appearing, you know, perception is one thing. We talked about perception in past episodes, but you also need to be authentic, and being authentic is not coming out the gates, you know, with like a fucking 8K video.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's so many tech products, mostly, I guess, consumer stuff. I'm just thinking like, I don't know, random e-rigs and things like this, where they spend so much effort on the marketing. And for me, it was weird because I'm always looking at it through that lens. I was always very marketing and brand first. But it's like you set yourself up with really high expectations, as you said, and we wanted to take the opposite approach of just like kind of look shitty online and be really impressed by the actual product and the support and the digital experience that you get. And now we want to bring the brand and marketing up to the level of the other stuff, I would say. But it is like, yeah, there's just so much out there where it's like you get a cool hype video and stuff like that, and then you get your hands on the product, and it's just like, damn, that was super disappointing, you know? And I'd rather, it sounds maybe crazy to say, but like, I'd rather us have shitty content and then you get into it and it's kind of like, oh yeah, they're working on it. There's a startup. There's scrappy, you know? I don't think a mismatch like that, as you said, of, oh, whoa, they're spending all this money and effort doing content, but the product is still like very much in progress. Like it kind of just feels disingenuous, you know? So yeah, it's hard for me taking the opposite approach to that always, of being like, yo, we got to just simplify it down as much as possible. But it is a strategy that works. Like the data speaks for itself.
Yeah,
So,
it helps when it works, because it's like as much as you don't want to create that because you are a quality content creator, at least when it gets 100,000 views, you're like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's so many times that we put our heart and soul into something that gets like maybe 1,000 views, you know, and you're still happy with 1,000 views.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's funny, even for us, like shitting out the iPhone video that gets a bunch of views, it's still a little painful for us,
yeah,
even though it's like accomplishing the end game goal there.
Yeah, it's like people want to follow like the underdog too. Like
Yes.
they want to support like the small, you know what I mean, and like be with them on that journey. Like I don't even know how many creators I've followed from like 5, 6 years ago, from like not even like having a place to stay to like
exactly.
$1 million mansions, and like just seeing that like
To come up as the
yeah,
best.
it's like,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like, it's strange also. I don't know. Have you guys seen any brands that are on the tech side of things that post the journey? Because I personally haven't really. Like, there are hash makers who are sharing the journey and all of that, but I haven't seen, especially other ERP software or stuff like that, that kind of show the journey. They try to keep it super buttoned up. But you guys have more exposure to brands. Like, have you seen that?
We work with some brands, you know, like joint filling machines and stuff, but they don't really focus on the, you know, they're focusing on the product. They want to show the machine. They want to shoot the high quality.
I've seen some like
of the
distros,
machine.
now that I think of it, but yeah, not really like the software, but like a lot of like distros and shit will just be like walking around fucking
Yeah.
filming the joint thing or whatever, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, like
Performs super well, like
pounds
Yeah,
and stuff. You
yeah.
can do that, but yeah, I feel like cultivation and extraction does a really good job of showing the BTS, right? Like behind the scenes iPhone of the lab, and that's what kills it on YouTube. It seems more educational, and then also on Instagram, like it's the niche, man. The niche community from the hash makers or the cultivators are gonna watch all that shit. They love it.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not tech. That's tech, but that's not software.
Yeah.
You know, so
Tech TEK.
yeah, you know, so it's not like the software involved. So you just
Yeah.
combine those, and it's like you're really getting to show. I don't know. I feel like all the videos on YouTube, you know, strain hunters, growers network, Canna Cribs, all these videos just get like hundreds of thousands, 500,000 views in 6 days. You know, and I feel like it's not suppressed as much because it's educational, and there's people out there who are actually growing home grow cultivators or whatever that
Yeah.
want the real information. It's not entertainment; it's information.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the future of, you know, what you can do with a bunch of these labs, and who knows, obviously you guys are more so on the extraction than on the cultivation, but who knows, like in the future. Talk about that. Was that something that obviously when these licensed grows, these medical grows these cultivations started popping up 2019 and before, everybody's trying to implement the new tech. So for like the hash making, this is like non-saturated industry.
It's super fascinating. I noticed it before, I think, actually, like the overall problem, even specifically of not having like paper notes, easy ways to store data, stuff like that. It was, I'm trying to think of the exact, yeah. So when I had a small delivery service and my co-founder was doing like most all of the, you know, actual product side of the business, and we started a small solventless setup, and it immediately became apparent that it was like, oh yeah, you get automated sprinklers, irrigation system, light control, all this stuff, and it had been out for a while, you know, and there were like cool tech products doing it, GrowLink, Pulse Grow, stuff like this. But when you'd go then to solventless, it was just like, I don't know, we're using still like a hair straightener basically, like, and so yeah, it was immediately jarring, and it's really still interesting to think about. Like, we've talked to all of the solventless equipment companies and have like pretty positive relationships with all of them, and I was really surprised going into it. I kind of assumed that all of them would just have what we were making already in progress, or like, oh yeah, we're going to do that, guys. But nobody did, and that just totally shocked me, because I'm like, wait a second, like, how can you continuously improve your hardware, for example, if you're not logging data on this stuff? Like, you're just going to put a product out there and then just see how it does, and like people are going to complain, and then you change it on the next version, but there's no data. So that never made sense. I was like,
how are you creating this insane product that's so
expensive
good?
ones too.
And you guys are not capturing data. They're
Very
doing
expensive ones
out of pure passion.
It was really interesting. So yeah, that was like the first thing that was just really jarring, I guess. And that's why we then like teched so hard into, okay, we got to get all of these companies connected, because it was like, okay, there's, you know, a lot of debate on what kind of wash vessel is best, right? Should it be top agitation, bottom agitation, square, round, all this stuff? We don't know. I don't think any companies know, to be honest. There's never been formal testing on this stuff. So that always really fascinated me. And yeah, I guess it's just like nobody wants to do it, because I think a few things. Like, the first factor is, when you look at any industry, you see tech come out in two phases, it seems like, where you have like, first people are doing this shit by hand and it's not scalable. So the first round of tech that comes in is like, just make that shit scalable, make it industrial. Then people are like, okay, well, that industrial gear like needs to be optimized. You know, how can we make that faster? How can we make it better? We're still in the first phase of just like, the first wash vessels only came out like 10 years ago still. So it's really quite new. So on that side, when I started to, I guess, think about it that way, it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense. We're in just like, people need scale right now. Like, we're going from hand washing to machine washing. That's the first major jump. And from, you know, putting myself in the shoes of an equipment company, it's like, yeah, why would we spend multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars doing data tracking stuff if we don't even know if it's going to work or help us? So it makes sense. I guess it's still kind of surprising from a product development standpoint, because I'm like, well, I mean, how can you how can you meaningfully improve your product if you don't get data from hash makers on it? But a lot of people disagree. You know that, oh yeah, well our wash vessel is the best. We know that. I'm like, okay, yeah, nice. Like, so yeah, it's very ripe for it. And I think the other aspect of it is this shit was just so illegal and so like niche for so long that it's just like nobody. I don't know. It's easy almost to look at cannabis in general and be like, okay, there needs to be tech there, but how many companies who make like cultivation software even know what the fuck rosin is? It's a small percent. Like we've talked to a lot of them, you know, and that was really shocking. Of like, okay, I think most people don't think of solventless as the future. It's still a very niche, random thing that just heady dabbers do. Our perspective is like, I guess similar to Puffco in that I think it is going to be archaic to smoke weed in the future. I think everybody is going to be smoking hash, you know? And when I look at it from that perspective, it's easy for us to be like, yeah, we need to make this tech. But at the same time, I see how the greater industry is just like, I don't know, what is that crazy niche? Like, it doesn't really matter. Have them use fucking spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so like, this might be a stupid question, I don't know, but is this something you could like just hit up the equipment manufacturers directly and be like as an add-on or like a build-in or something? It's like, is that ever a strategy or is it more like direct lab one-on-one?
No, definitely that's a huge part of our strategy. We spend a lot of time talking with different equipment companies, trying to figure out what we can do to collaborate. Like, in full transparency, sometimes
Like
it's
license it to them or something, or like
our like in the beginning we wanted to just make money selling integrations. We were like, that's going to be a huge part of the business. Like, we'll sell integrations to these companies. We started to realize then that it's actually just it's super risky for us, but it's actually better to not charge them and to just like own the platform actually and just be like, we'll do whatever it takes to get your stuff online. Your users get all of the benefits of our platform, because at the end of the day, we have totally different goals, an equipment company versus us as a software and data collection company. So there's definitely situations where we work directly with the companies, and I think like we're always open to licensing stuff if there are situations where it makes sense. But right now our focus is like getting companies that are super easy to connect to online. And examples of that are like other freeze dryer companies. Like, we started an integration with another one which is called Holland Green Science. They're really popular and up and coming in the hash space now. And like us adapting our system to connect to that is very easy relative to connecting to a wash vessel which has never had internet capability, you know? So it just depends, right? Like, if you have easy setups, then for us it's like, yeah, fuck it, let's add it in and just get it live and see what happens. Yeah. If it's super complicated and involves us reworking like how their system, how their controller works and sends stuff out, we've explored some of those and we've helped with those situations too. But yeah, in full transparency, like, it's really, I didn't realize how detrimental it was to do that for us as a startup, because we're really tight on resources. It's 2 guys full-time, 1 guy, you know, almost full-time. And to do monolithic integrations like that is just like, we can't afford to, yeah.
You can just be closing deals with all these other, yeah, it makes sense.
The tricky part of it is, though, we're on this bigger goal, right? Of like, we still want the whole cold room connected. And we know that digital entering stuff better than paper notes, but not that much better. Like, it'd be way better if your shit just talked to your phone and you didn't even have to write it down. Yeah, so
that's the end game goal, ultimate dream.
Definitely.
Just have like the whole lab set up to your phone.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's intriguing to think about like, why does that matter, right? Because cultivation, it matters if you're like, my sprinklers are on, fuck, I need to turn those off. It's not like you're going to look at your cold room and be like, it's 55 degrees, I crank it to 54. Like, so it is a little bit trickier of what integrations and like live stuff makes sense, I guess. It's not like a, you know, again, it's not like a sprinkler system. But the fascinating thing to think about with hash is you have more inputs and outputs than you do in cultivation. With cultivation, you're most of the time starting from scratch or starting with clones and then outputting from there, you know. Cultivation is super complicated. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's like the first step. When you go into manufacturing, though, you're dealing with intake, outtake, giving stuff back to growers in reports, getting stuff into distro. So the data that you need to be looking at is a much wider scope of, okay, these products went out that way. Oh, fuck, here's what happened with the freeze dryer. It's not as focused on just the garden, if that makes sense, you know? So I do think there's a hell of a lot of value in pulling all of this data off of machines, but it is going back to what we said before of like what's actually needed. We're constantly thinking of that and like seeing, for example, your press curve. You know, we did a lot of stuff with the connected rosin press, and like we love it. We think it's super useful, but realistically, like seeing the curve of your press as you're applying pressure is just not as critical as like, okay, I'm going to spend 45 minutes on data entry, you know? And the tricky thing is that they're interrelated and the line is very blurry between them, but we constantly have to look at every integration from that standpoint, which is why wash vessels have taken us so long and we're still not there yet. It's because no one is like, my wash vessel, I'm freaking out about that thing. I'm losing sleep in the middle of the night, you know? But freeze dryers, they're like, oh fuck, I actually wake up and have nightmares about that thing.
So put out the big fires first and then get all the sexy stuff later.
Should
once
we
you have it all down.
pop another dab in?
Yeah, let's end this thing. We're gonna pop a dab in. We're gonna wrap it up. Where where can everybody check out your platform, software, tech?
But you're talking about this. I can give a rundown of these. They might be interested in that. But
Just Hashy.SO on all platforms, Hashy.SO.
Hell yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah. Thanks for
And then
coming.
these are all of our customers too. So super cool. Lot of really good hash, pure and proper. If you guys were looking for some of the best hash in LA, definitely that stuff. But yeah, thanks.
awesome.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome
Good
catching
catching
up, and I'm sure we're gonna smoke some dabs and we're gonna talk some more. So let Aaron get on this call.
Got a boot.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for checking out this episode. Make sure to follow Chase and Hashy.SO.
Yep.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.
Peace.